I'm a doctor. I served 25 years in the Army, rose to colonel of the medical service, and have been retired for 10 years. But retired is a strong word. To this day, I continue to work in a private clinic. True scalpel in my hands not often, age still takes its toll, but the therapeutic reception lead. Jennifer, that's my wife's name, also still works, but in an advertising firm. She's a designer by training. To say we've been struggling financially, we weren't. We just worked our asses off. During my service, I traveled to many places. I was in Africa for almost a year, Mongolia, Vietnam. But I've hardly seen any of those countries. A doctor's work is almost round the clock and even more so in the military. Then came the hot spots of the collapsing Union. But every time I returned home, I knew that my loving wife and children were waiting for me. At least that's what I thought. Alas, as it turned out, it was just an attempt to pass off wishful thinking. Despite her age, my wife managed to keep her natural beauty. She always looked after herself, which allowed her to keep her girlish figure, and a face without a single wrinkle. When we walked side by side, she was mistaken for my young mistress. The contrast was too stark. A young blonde and a gray-haired mature man. Daddy and his young mistress. Jennifer was amused by this contrast, and it flattered me too, but as it turned out, I was having fun for nothing. It all happened one rainy November evening. Have you ever noticed that the events that change our lives for the worse happen on rainy fall evenings? I was sitting at the kitchen table going through my paperwork looking for my medical book. I had an appointment at the clinic on Monday, and I needed to find my immunization records. Jennifer wasn't home. She'd gone into town that afternoon to buy groceries and cook Sunday dinner for us. I rummaged through some old documents, some yellowed certificates, and then I found something that shocked me. It was an extract from my wife's medical book. It was dated just in the period when I was on a long business trip, and without almost a year, was not at home. It was 4 years after my daughter was born. It was about Jennifer's pregnancy and premature birth, labs, ultrasound results. Turns out Jennifer had a 6-month premature baby during that time period. After 3 days, he died. Next came the tests on her and the baby, blood type, Rh factor, and so on. So the baby was Ra negative and blood type 3. I felt like a closet had at least collapsed on me. There was no way I could be the baby's father. Jennifer and I are type O and Rh positive, so there's no way a child we have in common could have blood type O and Ra positive. And finally, the baby couldn't have been mine in the first place because I simply wasn't in the country at the time. I stared blankly at the statement for a long time, and I couldn't get my thoughts together. Jennifer wasn't faithful to me. While I was away from home, she managed to get pregnant and almost had a baby. But by whom? Half an hour ago, I was sure I had a strong family, a loving wife, and a cloudless future. Now I had nothing but ruins behind me. Finally, I managed to pull myself together. I carefully put the certificates back in their place and hid the extract I had found in my diplomat. The most important thing is to calm down. Don't get too excited. Jennifer cheating on me is a documented fact. To be honest, I wanted to have a showdown as soon as my wife got back, but I wanted to get to the bottom of it first. The kids, that was clear. They were 9 years apart. Both Derek and Catherine had blood type 2. You could tell they were mine. They both looked like me young, as much as children can look like their father. There was no doubt in my mind I was their father, but the thought didn't make me feel any better. I couldn't understand why she had done this to me. We married for love. I'd been courting her for almost a year. Other persons of the female sex for me did not exist, although I had an attractive appearance, and the attention of the opposite sex was not spoiled. But for me, all my life existed, only one woman, my Jennifer. During our life together, I tried to surround my wife with care and attention. Sometimes it seemed to me that I had no other single life. My wife was everything to me and more. And here it is. My heart ached. I went out on the balcony for a breath of fresh air. Looking down, I saw in the light of a dimly burning street lamp as a car stopped near our entrance. After a while, my wife jumped out of the car, followed by a man. He opened the back door and pulled out some packages. Jennifer gave him a quick peck on the cheek, took the bags, and walked into the driveway. The man plopped into the driver's seat and the car slowly pulled out of the yard. Yes, the farther away, the merrier. The front door lock clicked. "Thomas, are you home?" My wife's voice was unexpectedly loud, and I realized I couldn't take it anymore, and I was going to have to get into a fight right now. I stopped by Sophie's to talk about life. Jennifer's voice was emotionless. "Well, that's a long time. I'm going to make something quick. Why are you so pouty?" She kissed me on the cheek, and I heard the fresh smell of alcohol. But without puckering up, Sophie and I drank a little champagne. She wiped the lipstick off my cheek. "So she's the one who gave you a ride." I tried my best to speak calmly. Jennifer looked at me with an unfamiliar look. I could tell she didn't know how to answer me. "Thomas, don't be so hard on yourself. I came by cab, or rather, I got a ride from an acquaintance." My wife was frantically searching for the right answer. "What's the problem?" "Nothing. It must have been a very close acquaintance if you kissed him goodbye." My heart was pounding so hard I thought even the neighbors could hear it. To keep myself occupied and calm, I got up and pulled a full bottle of whiskey out of my locker. Jennifer looked at me fearfully. "Where'd you get it?" "How do I know? I was standing on the balcony and saw you saying goodbye to the driver." It took me a lot of effort to stay calm and not to shout. "A kiss is a fair. Thomas." "What, Thomas?" I poured myself a whiskey. "Sit down, I have a few questions for you." I pulled a stool out from under the table and took the unfortunate statement out of my briefcase. "Jennifer, what is this?" I placed the document in front of my wife. She carefully turned a few pages and quickly jerked her hand away. "Where did this come from?" Jennifer raised her eyes to me, which began to fill with tears. You read it." "Jennifer, who got you pregnant? What happened?" I picked up the glass but couldn't bring myself to drink. She was silent for a while, then suddenly said in an unexpectedly calm voice, "It was bound to happen sometime, and maybe it's even good that it happened now." In a steady, calm voice, she told me that in my absence, a long absence as she emphasized, she had met a young man whom she had fallen in love with. He was 11 years younger. It was like an obsession, she couldn't help it. At first she ran to him for dates, and then she took the children to her mother, and he moved into our apartment with her. They started living as husband and wife. From the sessions of unearthly love she got pregnant, and he proposed to her. To her, a married woman, the mother of my 2 children. In her love stupor she even secretly hoped that I wouldn't come back at all, and then everything would work itself out. They'd get married and be together. But something didn't work out. The baby was born prematurely and died 3 days later. That's where she burst into tears. I understood that she didn't care about the remaining children. After the child's death, relations between them cooled, and they, according to her, began to distance themselves from each other. Then a young woman appeared on the horizon, and her lover finally left her, in pursuit of new adventures. After worrying for a while, Jennifer took the children and waited for me. When I returned, she greeted me as if nothing had happened. And for the next few years, she diligently played the role of loving and caring wife. I was shocked. To be honest, for a while, I lost the ability to think and speak at all. I silently stared at the wall, and not a single thought popped into my head. I just stared blankly at one point. But that wasn't all. 6 months ago, her heartfelt friend appeared in our city. Passion flared with renewed vigor. It turns out she'd been in love with him all these years, and my wife fell into his arms. In general, they meet all this time, and she wants to start a new life, in which, alas for me, there is no place. She has lived with me for 40 years, given me her best years, and now that the kids are grown up, she wants to start over with the man she loves. Saying all of this, she knew full well that with every word she said, she was mercilessly killing me. For a second, she reminded me of an executioner, indifferently doing his job. It's nothing personal. It's love. It happens. That's it. We can exhale and drink. What happened next? I poured the whiskey again and drank it in one gulp. It's a strange drink. It doesn't get me at all. Maybe it's weathered. I took the bottle and looked at the light. No, the color's fine. Light brown like an aged Irish Vicky should be. Oh, I get it. I just need to pour more. What am I really doing? Or maybe you don't pour it. You pour it straight from the neck. You've noticed that a bottle of good whiskey has a wide, comfortable neck, like a decanter. Very convenient, I'll tell you. You practically don't need a glass. Jennifer sat across from me and was silent. I got worried. Maybe something had happened, Or maybe she was just out of steam. She spoke so well, so well. Good girl. She's been screwing me over for years. If I hadn't found the transcript, I probably wouldn't have figured it out. Good for her. A real hereditary woman. And what a thing to say, it happens. Of course it happens, it's no big deal. It happens, that's all. I should close the window, it's cold. I got up, pushed the stool with my foot, and went into the bedroom. Without saying a word, I got undressed, threw some things in my bag, and without saying a word, I went out. Thomas? A half-question hung in the air. You don't have to go out at night. I looked at her. Her dark silhouette stood out against the kitchen doorway. Aren't you going to tell me anything? Is she going to cry, or is it just me? Poor girl, so nervous. I shrugged, opened the door, and walked out, trying not to hit the doorframe with my horns. Outside, the fall awaited me. I breathed in the damp air, threw my bag on my shoulder, and slowly wandered down the sidewalk strewn with yellow leaves. I really wanted a cigarette. I even patted my pockets just in case. Of course, I couldn't find anything because I had quit smoking 20 years ago at Jennifer's request. She was very concerned about my health and longevity. It was quite late. The city was trying to forget itself in a troubled sleep. The windows of the houses were barely lit, and only the streetlights cast a dim light on the almost deserted streets. A cell phone beeped. Jennifer, worried about her husband. I clicked off and turned the phone off. Suddenly I was so sad that I clenched my teeth around the collar of my coat to keep from howling in despair. It was only now that I realized what had happened. I even shook my head, as if I could drive away the thoughts that were killing me. What to do? Where to go? The easiest thing to do would be to slam the door and walk out with my head held high. But go where? To the kids? They've got enough problems as it is. I've never had a mistress, probably for nothing. Only to work, like on duty. Stay the night and make a final decision tomorrow. I walked slowly past the black houses, trying not to slip on the wet, fallen leaves. Hey man, do you have a cigarette? I turned around and fell into the darkness. Jennifer gently removed her lover's hand from her chest and quietly got out of bed. For the first time in recent memory, they were loving each other without fear of being exposed. The woman threw on a robe and went into the kitchen. An unfinished bottle of whiskey stood on the table. He never cleans up after himself. I have to do everything, she thought, and suddenly caught herself thinking about her husband. Thomas, where did he go? He's not answering his phone. Whatever happened?